Star Georgia wide receiver George Pickens is back at practice. He has been for a few weeks. As a media member, I've gotten to see, the media's gotten to see in limited capacity what he's been able to do as far as running routes and catching balls and starting to look like his normal self a little bit. And now we're hearing that he's getting reps on the scout team. Kirby Smart talked about that a little bit tonight in the media availability. We talked to Amir Speed and Dan Jackson, what they have to say about George Pickens, and when will we see him back? Ryan Curley from Dog Post here, bringing you all the details on the George Pickens situation. So, and if you're not going to dogpost.com, I don't know what you're doing. We have all the insider coverage for you at dogpost.com. It's awesome. So, I'm going to just go ahead and read you. I'll kick this off by going ahead and reading you what Kirby Smart said tonight. It's a little lengthy. It'll take a few seconds, but on George Pickens' return, this is what he had to say. He'd be just like those other guys, Darnell Washington, Tyke Smith, JT Daniels coming off his injury, Dominic Blaylock coming off his injury. There's a process that has to happen. You don't just come back from an injury and then just jump back into it right where you were. So he's talking about, he's back and getting reps, but, I think at this point, it's a little bit more of a cautionary measure that George Pickens isn't back out there. But as far as health goes, he's a lot closer to being ready than I think we may have guessed he would have been. What else do you have to say? He said, it's hard because you have to get all those reps, the volume of reps, the work. There are only so many reps you can give on the actual execution. George is loaded at receiver, and that's a great thing. We've seen a lot of guys really shine this year, guys we've never seen before. Brock Bowers, Adonai Mitchell come to mind, and that's not just the extent of it. We have, Georgia has guys like Darnell Washington, Karis Jackson, Jermaine Burton, Ladd McConkey has broken out. Georgia's loaded at receiver, but I have a tough time saying any of them are as good as George Pickens. I think if he was playing college football right now, obviously he's not, but I think if he was out there and healthy, people would start to remember why he's one of the 2 or 3 best wide receivers in the entire country, and a lot of people think he's the best, and a lot of people think he's a future first-round NFL pick, and I agree, but he needs to play if that's going to happen. And obviously, making sure that he's healthy is Georgia's highest priority, because they don't want to just throw him out there when he's not ready. They don't want to risk him re-injuring his ACL. That's something that we've seen with Dominic Blaylock, Zamir White, who re-injure themselves when maybe they weren't ready, or at least it's easier to re-injure yourself than it would have been if you had only had that injury once. So George Pickens, and so now we know that he's been playing with the scout team and starting to get reps there, which means he's starting to get more contact reps. What I've heard is that he's balling out. That's what I was told today. George Pickens is balling out on scout team. Guys like Darian Kendrick are having a very tough time guarding him. To me, that's a good sign that Georgia's stud wide receiver is getting a lot closer to getting back. When will we see him? There is no date. Kirby Smart is reluctant to give a timetable for when Pickens is supposed to come back. The medical staff is working on it, obviously. But, I think it's very possible we're going to see him this year. And as far as his NFL future goes, I think he's much more benefited from playing this year as long as he doesn't get hurt again. And he's a game changer. I've been on here and said it before. I've talked about this before. George Pickens is a game changer. George Pickens is an elite talent. He is very difficult to guard. I'm sure if you asked SEC defenders that have played against him, I'm sure they'd say that they don't want to guard George Pickens because he's a touchdown waiting to happen. He's a big play waiting to happen. He's I wouldn't say physically he's your stereotypical receiver. You want to be a little bit beefier. He's a slim guy, but he's got the height, he's got the speed, he's got the hands, and obviously he's strong enough to hang in there. He really is a star, and Georgia has an opportunity to get him back this year. The 3 remaining games on Georgia's regular season schedule are Tennessee, Charleston Southern, and Georgia Tech. Games that they should win, games that they are going to be favored by at least 20 points. I think at the last time I looked at the Tennessee line, it was 21 points, so about 3 touchdowns, and they should take care of business there. You'd love to have a guy like George Pickens get back before the SEC championship, before before these games become elimination games, like a potential playoff run that seems likely for Georgia at this point. You want to see George get back before that. I think it's possible. I think it's possible. If you could get him in there for that Georgia Tech game and even just get him a few snaps, get him comfortable, and you have him in there for a championship run, I mean, how are you going to guard the Georgia Bulldogs if you have George Pickens out there, Darnell Washington out there, Brock Bowers out there, Jermaine Burton out there? You got guys like Arian Smith out there, James Cook. I mean, so dynamic. It's what Georgia's offense has the potential to become what we thought it was going to be this year with all of these guys. And George Pickens is a big part of that. Obviously, Eric Gilbert is not someone who we think is going to come back. At this point, I think it's just too late. Maybe next year. He's obviously a star talent of his own right. And I think as much as Georgia's dominated this year and as good as Georgia's wide receiver room is, George Pickens is an absolute star. And he is a game changer. I mean, how else am I supposed to put it? I mean, he would make Georgia even almost impossible to guard, in my opinion. I mean, not that any team's impossible to guard, but how do you defend all those guys, especially if you have someone like George Pickens out there, and then you have to account for guys like Jermaine Burton, Arian Smith, Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey. All of them are stars. I mean, who's not a star in this Georgia offense? Kearis Jackson. They're all really, really good players that would put up insane numbers on other teams. That's the thing. It's the good problem that Georgia has on this offense is almost too many mouths, not enough to go around situation. And George Pickens would only add to that. Dominic Blaylock is another guy I haven't even talked about in this video. Someone else who's gearing for a return at some point this season. Another 5-star wide receiver who's an absolute star in his own right, and he's very good. And unfortunately, Georgia hasn't had him the last 2 years. But they have an opportunity to get Dominic Blaylock and George Pickens back. And especially having a guy like Pickens in there just absolutely changes the game for Georgia. So, it's starting to look like we're going to see him this year. The fact that he's balling out in scout team is a good sign. Obviously, it's a scout team, but it's good reps for him. They're good reps for him, and he's getting healthier. I mean, just from what I've seen from him in practice, I think he looks really good. He's clearly the best receiver out there, and that's just during a few minutes of practice that I get to see once a week. So, George Pickens, will he come back this year? Should he come back this year? What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. And be sure to go to dogpost.com for all of your Georgia football coverage.